Module 7 looks at industry communications, and so we're going to take a close look at something that's more complicated than we realize, and that is whether or not GMOs should be labeled. First, let's make sure that we understand what we're talking about when we're talking about GMOs. GMO stands for genetically modified organism. Genetic modification sounds scary to people, but really it's helpful to realize that every single thing that we eat today has been genetically modified through traditional farming methods and traditional animal breeding methods. So on the bottom there I've got a stalk of corn that probably looks familiar to you, but this is not how corn originally existed as a native plant. It was actually like that little stalk of brown, looks like a weed on the side. Corn in its wild form was not immediately edible. People had to they had to grind it, they had to cook it in order for the body to be able to digest it. And so the corn that we have today has been genetically bred through traditional crossbreeding methods to be something that we recognize. On the right, you'll see a lot of different vegetables that you probably recognize, but what you may not know is that each of these have the same ancestor. They all come from wild mustard plant, but through breeding and agricultural methods, we have the vegetables that we are familiar with today, and a variety of them. So what is GMO technology then? It is relatively new technology. It falls under the umbrella of biotechnology. And what it is that scientists can now identify just one gene that's doing something useful, and they're able to transfer that gene to a new species so that whatever it is that's useful from that gene is now done by that new species. This is called transgenic modification. This is what a GMO is. Up at the top, I've got an example of traditional breeding that farmers have been doing for many, many, many years. So it's an example of two different apples. One of them produces big fruit, but not very sweet. Another apple tree produces small fruit, but quite sweet. With selective breeding, farmers have been able to crossbreed this type of situation and eventually hopefully end up with what they want, which is a big fruit but also a sweet fruit. On the bottom, we have an example of what GMO technology can do. So we've got our regular fruit, but this particular fruit might be very vulnerable to an insect. And with GMO technology, the scientists can go find the gene that will protect from that insect. So maybe it's a bacteria that emits a protein that protects itself from insects. They can insert that gene into the fruit, and now what they've created is an apple that is insect resistant because it now has the gene that protects itself from that insect. It's important to realize that each GMO that's created is unique. We can't lump them all together because each GMO creates a new plant that never existed before. And so when it comes to safety, we can't just say, are GMOs safe or are they not safe? We have to look at each one that has been developed. One of the best ways to understand GMOs is to understand one of the biggest GMOs, and that is called Bt cotton and Bt corn. So I'm going to tell you a GMO story. This is the creation of these two very prominent GMO crops. So cotton and corn were being decimated by a worm, and so farmers that grew these crops were having a very difficult time fighting off a worm that was destroying their crops. And it was very expensive to fight. They had to spray their fields over and over again with an insecticide in order to kill that worm. With GMO technology, scientists were able to find out that there is a bacteria that lives in soil, and that bacteria emits a protein that kills this specific worm. Now remember that protein is something that we can digest no problem. We just break it down into amino acids. And so when we eat this bacteria and the protein that it emits, it's not toxic to us at all. But it turns out that this protein is toxic to the worm because the worm cannot digest it. And so it kills the worm. So scientists with GMO technology have been able to find the gene that tells that bacteria to release that protein. They inserted that gene into the DNA of cotton and also corn. And now what we have are crops of cotton that emit this protein and crops of corn that emit this protein. The crops protect themselves from the worm. And so instead of having to spray the fields with insecticides, the plant itself protects itself. And so the one thing I want you to know is that this protein is called Bt, and Bt is organic. You can actually buy a bottle of Bt to spray on your organic garden to protect from pests because it is an organic molecule. It's made from a bacteria. And so it is quite safe and it's used in organic farming. I just want to show you data. This is from the University of Arizona, who works very closely with our Arizona cotton farmers, which is a huge crop in Arizona. And I just want to show you what this looks like. So you can see back in 1991 to 1995, the farmers were needing to spray their field of cotton up to 12 times over a growing season. This is incredibly expensive. The insecticide goes on the plant, but it also saturates the soil because you have to just douse the entire plant. And so they were losing the battle. But then with the introduction of GMO cotton, with Bt cotton, as that got worked into the system where farmers were adopting the Bt cotton, you can see that their reliance on spraying insecticide went down to basically zero. So here we are at the 2011 when all of the cotton farmers have now adapted to GMO cotton, and they no longer really have to spray the field with the insecticide. The plants themselves are emitting the protein. This is much more precise because it's not saturating the soil, it's just emitting the protein from the actual plant. unfortunately, there's a lot of misinformation about GMO technology, and a lot of fear comes from this because people are misinformed. This is a picture of a crop that was developed. You may have heard of it in your other classes. It's called golden rice. And so in certain parts of the world where people might be very, very low income and existing mainly on a very limited diet that contains a lot of white rice and very little other foods, we have a problem with vitamin A deficiency. So with vitamin A deficiency, if you remember from your nutrition classes, a person can actually go blind, and in particular children. In fact, vitamin A deficiency is the leading cause of blindness in children that's preventable worldwide. With GMO technology, scientists were able to create a strain of rice that actually contains vitamin A. And that's why it has this golden color. So you see this golden rice, and in fact they called it golden rice. This was created in order to deliver it to very vulnerable parts of the world in hopes that they would start adopting this instead of the white rice strain to fix the vitamin A deficiency. Unfortunately, this has become a case study of misinformation keeping the product out of the hands of people that need it. And so because of distrust, because of misinformation, this crop has not really been able to be adopted in places of the world that truly need it. The application of GMO technology can be used to help us with a lot of problems that we currently have in producing enough food, producing healthy food for a growing population. And so we can use GMO technology to create a plant that produces a certain nutrient, as in the case of golden rice. Here I have a picture of a GMO potato that was developed. Potatoes, when they're cooked at a very high heat, like when you fry them, they actually produce a known carcinogen called acrylamide. And this is in very low doses, and so it's not necessarily going to hurt you to have fried potatoes once in a while. But if your diet consists of a lot of fried potatoes, you are getting a pretty big dose of a known carcinogen. With GMO technology, they created potatoes that do not make this carcinogen when you fry them. Unfortunately, they did not take off in mass-produced foods. The aim of the crop was to sell it to McDonald's, who is the biggest seller of fried potatoes in the world. But McDonald's backed out of the deal because of misinformation and distrust from consumers. They knew that their audience, the people that eat there, once they learned that they were using GMO potatoes, that it would damage their reputation, because the public just didn't understand that this was actually healthier for them. And so unfortunately they're not in big use. But that's another potential application of GMOs. Scientists are looking at all different kinds of ways to use GMO technology, creating plants that need less water or that survive a very dry season or a very hot season, plants that increase their yield or that will grow in certain environments that they don't currently grow in. They can even look at plants that will make less of a known allergen. So imagine if we were able to create peanuts that no longer have the protein that is a known allergen, potentially reducing the risk of peanut allergy reactions. So there are a lot of different applications, but the mistrust of the public keeps these applications from really moving forward. Of course, the major question that we have are GMOs safe? And as I said, we have to look at each GMO, but the GMOs that are on the market have been tested extensively. And the overall conclusion is that yes, they are safe. And this is according to a report by the National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine that looked at over 900 studies and publications. Also, it has now been over 20 years that GMOs have been on the market, And so we can conclusively say that you do not need to avoid GMOs for your health. There is nothing about GMOs that is dangerous for you or less nutritious for you. So now that we have a firm background on what GMOs are and whether or not you should be scared of them, we get to the topic of whether or not they should be labeled. And so it really comes down to this. I think this little cartoon summarizes the issue pretty well. If we do label GMOs, is there a clear reason that the public needs to know whether a food product contains GMO ingredients? And also, is the public ready to accurately make a decision based on that labeling? That is, do they actually understand what a GMO is and if it's something that they should be concerned about? So, this cartoon really sums it up. When people are advocating for labeling, they say, well, if GMOs are so safe, then why are you afraid of labeling them? But we also know that if we do start labeling GMOs, then this argument will be made. If GMOs are so safe, then why do they need warning labels? It really is not something that's as simple as it sounds.